For folks who don't know a lot about cyber charters, it could look like, well, how difficult can this be? The child is sitting at home in front of a computer and you're just delivering coursework to them. Why can't you do that for $5,800 or $6,000? Explain how this works.
First of all, we are amenable to every code that's there. We're amenable to the public school code, Code 22. We're amenable to the charter school code and to cyber charter school code. So that means that we have to have guidance counselors. We're responsible for having nurses. We not only deal with the child's education, we have to deal with the child's social development. If the child comes to us 2 or 3 grade levels behind, we have to offer supplemental services. We have a Title I program. So it's not simply sitting at the computer. We have certified teachers. We have to support the families, and we're in partnership with parents, but the teachers drive instruction and authenticate learning. So it's not simply sitting there in front of the computer. We are a comprehensive school.
What about that, Tim?
Well, I would respectfully disagree that the funding model is built on what we have in funding for public schools. It's on the model that used to be in place for public schools, but public schools have not gotten per pupil funding in about a dozen or so years, probably longer than that. They get percentage increases every year. It doesn't matter what's going on the ground. It doesn't matter how many more kids the school has. It doesn't matter if there's more special ed kids. It doesn't, nothing that's going on in the school district matters. You get the percentage, and you know, they throw in a couple of supplements, so you may get more or less you know, different dollars than what the percentage is. Cyber schools, and again, both bricks and mortar and cyber, are the only schools that I'm aware of that get per pupil funding anymore. So if they send a school district a bill, you know, the number is the number. There's no fudging. There's no, well, we're going to give you 2% less because we got 2% less than last year. So they're getting funding based on their pupils, and school districts are not.
And some people look at this, though, and think the education establishment, the traditional bricks and mortar schools, the teachers union, school boards, anybody who has an investment in keeping public education exactly the way it is, feels threatened by the rise of these charter schools. They still only represent about 1% of, I think, the student population choosing that, but it's growing. Every year it's been growing. Are you threatened by the rise of
Well, we're not. As I said earlier, we supported the charter school law. We didn't support it at the end because of 2 things. Number one, the funding issue, and here we are now 10 years later, and it's kind of coming back to haunt us. And the other issue was the Charter Appeal Board, which I won't get into, but that's a different thing. But we don't feel threatened. Again, these are public schools. It's public school choice. I've said time and again that there are definitely kids, families, who do better in cyber charter schools. There's kids that do better in school districts. I think every educator, no matter where they're working, agrees kids don't learn the same. And, you know, kids need different structure. They need different, some kids need to get up later maybe and stay at school longer. Some kids can be counted on to do their work. Some kids need more oversight.
And I think that was the selling point initially for charter schools, that you can tailor and individualize the education for kids. Is that coming true, though? Is that promise being met?
Absolutely. We have documented from our data that the longer a child is with us, the better the child does. We can take a child and a child can be in 3rd grade and be in, let's say, 1st grade math and be in 3rd grade language arts and reading, and we can close that gap for that child. If you were to look at our PSSA scores over the last 3 years, you see an incline, whereas 2 years ago, we were at 49% of our students were at the proficient and the advanced level, whereas now in math, 60% of our students are there. And that's quite a closing of the achievement gap there.
Let's take a call right now from Tara in Carlisle. Tara, welcome to Smart Talk this evening. And what's your question or comment?
My comment is I am totally pro cyber charter schools, and I'm very proud to be in Pennsylvania, who has been a leader in this country in cyber charter schools. I have a son with a 120 IQ that was not making it in a brick and mortar school and transferred to a cyber school in 11th grade, and because of the one-on-one care that he received, flourished. He was not doing well with a 120 IQ in brick and mortar schools. There are kids that need this out, and we're not going to serve them well if we don't give it to them. I was very glad to live in Pennsylvania at the time that he wasn't doing well.
Let me ask you this, though. When you heard or read about these stories that the charter schools, in some cases, were building up reserve funds because they were getting more money from the state and the school districts than they actually needed to deliver the education, did that trouble you at all?
Not at all, because what this is going to do is allow us to continue to lead in the cyber school movement in the country. They're getting 75%. Where's the other 25% going? To the school district. For a student that's no longer in the district.
All right, thanks for your call this evening. Tim, a couple of things. One, that issue of the unreserved fund balances. That's something that troubled the Auditor General of the state. It's something that troubles the Ridge administration. And frankly, some taxpayers who read about it say, why do these cyber charter schools need to have gotten that money? What troubles you about that?
Well, and this is the whole accountability issue, which is, other than funding, kind of a quote-unquote other issue here. There are a number of things that school districts have to do in the name of public accountability that charter schools and cyber charter schools do not. And one of them is that for school districts there is a limit on their fund balance, and the limit is based on their budget. So the larger your budget, the larger the percentage that you're allowed to have. What the Auditor General has found is that there are a number of cyber schools that have fund balances of up to 30%, which I think the largest one in public schools would be 12% of your budget. So I think in the Auditor General's mind that created a, why do you need such a large fund balance?
What about that? Why do these schools need that fund balance, number one? And number two, if you have that much money left over, why not return it to the school districts?
Well, first of all, the fund balances that the schools have, most of them have accumulated those balances over a 6-year period. Let me talk specifically about our school. Our first year, we didn't have a fund balance at all. When we ended last year, we invested almost all of our money in our students. We ended the year, I think, with like $300,000 at the end of the year. So what you look at is that fund balance is something that has been accumulated over a 6-year period. And we're now at a point where we can begin to invest that money back into our students. When we started our guidance department, Tim talked about our cyber schools being under the same mandates as public schools. Well, we're under Chapter 12, which means that we have to have students assistance programs, we have to have guidance counselors. All of that costs money. And so we were able to then use that money to begin to do that, to reinvest in the students. That's how we were able to make AYP, and we had
adequate yearly progress.
Adequate yearly progress. And if you remember back in November 2003, when Governor Rendell did not pass the education budget, cyber charter schools don't have any place to go and get money. We can't go get money from the community. We don't have property, so we can't go float a bond or to get a loan against that. So in the event that we don't get our funding, we have to be able to still pay the employees that are depending on us to pay them and to maintain the facilities of our administrative buildings.
So you would argue it's a prudent set-aside of funds in case of an emergency. Tim?
Well, I don't have a problem with that. I'm just not sure that 30% is where it should be. That's something that I guess the Auditor General is going to have to look at. But I mean, you touch on a bigger point, which is there are a lot of things in the school code that don't apply to charter schools. And again, I'll go back to the charter school law. Part of the purpose of the law was to create charter schools and have them to some extent serve as laboratories for public education in general, and we did that by saying, here are some things that you're not going to be accountable for. For example, the charter school law said that they only had to have 75% of teachers who were certified, and frankly, that was something that we were interested in because, in our way of thinking, there's really no correlation between a certified teacher and whether or not a kid's making AYP. And I know that's going to sound funny to a lot of people, but I was just at a meeting today and someone from the Department of Education made that very statement, so I feel comfortable saying it. So what we were hoping was that, well, we'll give them some freedom from some mandates, and hopefully they can come back and say to us, look, here's what works and here's what doesn't work. In this instant case about teacher certification, we were hoping that maybe they could say, well, it's really important for these subjects, it's maybe not so important and you know, maybe that would apply to public schools in general and help public schools to save some dollars. That hasn't happened for one reason or another.